There is a war being fought, not in distant lands or on foreign battlefields, but in the depths of every man's soul. It is the oldest war known to humanity, and it rages on, moment by moment, breath by breath, in the space between what we feel and what we choose to do. Most men never realize they are soldiers in this war. They mistake the battlefield for the world around them, their enemies for other people, their victories for conquests over external circumstances. They spend their lives trying to control everything except the one thing that determines their fate, themselves. Marcus Aurelius understood this truth. Emperor of Rome, commander of legions, ruler of the known world, yet he wrote in his private journal, his meditations, not about the glory of conquest, but about the daily struggle to master his own mind. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he reminded himself in the quiet hours before dawn. Realize this, and you will find strength. This was not the confession of a weak man, but the recognition of a wise one, for Aurelius had learned what every great leader must learn, that all external power is an illusion. If you cannot control the empire within, think of the men who have shaped history. Not the tyrants who ruled through fear, but the leaders who commanded respect through their presence alone.
Oh.
What did they possess that others did not? What invisible force allowed them to remain calm in chaos, decisive in uncertainty, and strong? In the face of suffering, they had discovered the secret that eludes most men. True power flows from self-mastery, not from mastery over others. The modern world offers endless distractions from this truth. We're told that power comes from wealth, from status, from the ability to influence others. We chase external validation, build empires of possession, accumulate followers and achievements. Yet how many successful men lie awake at night, prisoners of their own anxious thoughts? How many powerful leaders crumble under pressure, slaves to their emotions, victims of their own unchecked desires? The Stoics saw through this illusion 2,000 years ago. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, understood freedom better than most emperors. He taught that we are only truly free when we focus our energy on what lies within our control, our thoughts, our choices, our responses to whatever life presents. Wealth consists in not having great possessions, he said, but in having few wants. This is not poverty of spirit, but richness of soul. And you need nothing from the external world to maintain your peace. You possess everything. When your happiness depends not on circumstances, but on your response to circumstances, you become unconquerable. The path to this inner sovereignty is narrow and steep. It requires facing enemies more dangerous than any human opponent, more cunning than any political rival, more persistent than any external challenge. These enemies live within us. They know our weaknesses intimately. Anger is the first and perhaps most seductive of these inner enemies. It promises justice, offers the illusion of strength, whispers that righteous fury will solve our problems. Yet observe a man in the grip of anger, how his judgment clouds, how his words become weapons that wound both others and himself, how his power dissolves into reactive chaos. The Stoic warrior learns to recognize anger not as strength but as weakness disguised. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whenever you want to cheer yourself, consider the good qualities of your companions." Anger rises. The disciplined mind turns toward understanding rather than judgment, toward response rather than reaction. This does not mean becoming passive or allowing others to take advantage. The Stoic stands firm in his principles, but he does so from a place of clarity, not heat. His strength comes not from emotional fire, but from the cool steel of disciplined will. Fear is anger's quiet cousin, equally destructive, but more subtle in its approach. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of loss. These invisible chains bind more men than any external prison. The businessman paralyzed by the possibility of bankruptcy. The leader who avoids difficult decisions to preserve his reputation. The father who fails to guide his children because he fears their disapproval. All are slaves to this most basic emotion. Seneca, who served as advisor to emperors and amassed great wealth, understood that fear of loss is often more painful than loss itself. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, he observed. The mind that dwells on potential disasters creates a prison of anxiety, while the mind that accepts uncertainty as the nature of existence finds freedom even in difficulty. The Stoic does not eliminate fear, he transforms it. Fear becomes fuel for preparation. Uncertainty becomes an opportunity for growth. The possibility of loss becomes a reminder to appreciate what remains. Where others see threats, the disciplined mind sees challenges. Where others find paralysis, the Stoic finds purpose. But perhaps no enemy is more dangerous than the ego itself, that voice that demands recognition, that hungers for praise, that cannot bear to be wrong or overlooked. The ego convinces us that our worth depends on external validation, that our identity is built on achievements and acquisitions. It transforms every interaction into a competition, every conversation into a performance, every setback into a personal attack. The ego is not evil, it serves a purpose in motivating us toward excellence. But when it becomes our master rather than our tool, it destroys the very peace and strength it claims to seek. The man driven by ego can never rest, for there is always another person to impress, another competitor to defeat, another hill to climb in the endless quest for superiority. Marcus Aurelius, who held more earthly power than perhaps any man in history, wrote these words to himself: "Remember that very little disturbs the balance of the soul that is truly centered. The centered soul has tamed the ego, using its energy while refusing its demands." Such a man can receive praise without pride and criticism without defensiveness. He acts not to impress others, but to align with his highest values. Lust, too, must be understood, not merely sexual desire, but the broader hunger that drives men to consume, to possess, to take what is not freely given. This is the desire that sees other people as objects to be used, that treats the world as a resource to be exploited, mistakes temporary pleasure for lasting satisfaction. The Stoic does not reject pleasure or avoid the good things of life, but he receives them as gifts rather than claiming them as rights. He enjoys what comes without demanding what does not. He loves without possessing, appreciates without grasping, experiences without becoming enslaved to experience. This mastery over internal enemies requires daily practice, constant vigilance, and infinite patience with oneself. The work is never finished because new challenges constantly arise. The executive who has mastered anger in business meetings may find it surfacing in traffic. The father who remains calm with his children may struggle with patience when dealing with his aging parents. But this is not failure, it is the human condition. The Stoic warrior does not expect perfection, commits to continuous improvement. Each moment offers a new opportunity to choose response over reaction, wisdom over impulse, principle over convenience. The battlefield of self-mastery is won not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent choices. The choice to pause before speaking in anger. The choice to listen rather than defend. The choice to act from principle rather than emotion. These seemingly minor decisions accumulate into character, and character determines destiny. There is profound strength in stillness, in a world that mistakes noise for importance and activity for progress. The man who has learned to be still possesses a rare and powerful quality. This is not the stillness of laziness or indecision, but the stillness of deep roots, of unshakable foundation, of inner certainty. Watch a master craftsman at work. His movements are economical, precise, without wasted motion. He does not rush or force, but allows skill and patience to guide his hands. This is the stillness that comes from mastery, the quiet confidence of one who knows his craft so deeply that external pressure cannot disturb his performance. The same principle applies to leadership, to relationships, to every area of life. The man who has mastered himself moves through the world with a different quality of presence. Does not need to prove his strength because it radiates from his very being. He does not need to demand respect because his character commands it naturally. Others may mistake this stillness for weakness, this quiet confidence for lack of ambition. They are accustomed to leaders who shout to be heard, who use force where influence would suffice, who mistake drama for importance. But those with eyes to see recognize true power when they encounter it. Marcus Aurelius led legions into battle, governed a vast empire, made decisions that affected millions of lives. Yet his greatest battles were fought in silence, in the privacy of his own thoughts, in the daily discipline of aligning his actions with his principles. His true strength was not displayed on battlefields, but cultivated in moments of solitude. In the patient work of shaping his character, this inner work is invisible to the world, yet it affects everything. The man who has learned to govern his thoughts influences others, not through manipulation, but through example. His clarity of mind helps others think more clearly. His emotional stability provides an anchor in turbulent times. His commitment to principle inspires others to examine their own values. Such a man does not seek followers, yet people naturally gravitate toward his presence. He does not demand loyalty, yet others trust him instinctively. He does not claim authority, yet his words carry weight. This is the paradox of true leadership. It emerges not from the desire to control others, but from the commitment to control oneself. The stillness of mastery also transforms how we experience conflict. The undisciplined mind meets opposition with resistance, argument with argument, aggression. With aggression, it escalates conflicts and creates enemies where none need exist. But the still mind has options that the reactive mind cannot see. Sometimes stillness means simply not responding to provocation. The insult that meets silence loses its power. The criticism that finds no defensive reaction reveals its own weakness. The attack that encounters no resistance often collapses under its own weight. At other times, stillness means responding with unexpected calm to situations that typically generate heat. The business negotiation conducted without emotional investment often achieves better results than the one driven by ego. The family conflict addressed with patient understanding rather than defensive anger creates space for genuine resolution. This is not weakness disguised as strength. Is strength so complete that it needs no display? The oak tree does not bend in the wind to show its flexibility. It remains rooted while allowing its branches to move with the storm. Similarly, the man of stillness can be gentle without being weak, firm without being harsh, decisive without being rushed. The world often misunderstands such men. In cultures that celebrate loudness and mistake aggression for strength and activity for achievement, the still man may seem out of place. Others may interpret his lack of emotional reactivity as coldness, his principled decisions as rigidity, his self-sufficiency as arrogance. But those who truly know him recognize something different. They see the warmth that exists beneath the calm surface, the flexibility that comes from being rooted in principle rather than blown about by circumstance, the genuine humility that needs no false modesty because it rests on solid self-knowledge. Stoics understood that true masculine strength is not about domination, but about service to principle, to purpose, to the highest good as one understands it. This service requires strength of a different kind than the world typically recognizes. It requires the strength to do what is right when it is not popular, to speak truth when it is not welcome, to remain consistent when circumstances pressure us toward compromise. Such strength cannot be faked or borrowed. It must be developed through practice, tested through trial, refined through experience. It grows in silence and reveals itself in action. It needs no announcement because its presence is unmistakable to those with the wisdom to recognize it. In stillness, we discover not emptiness, but fullness. Not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of feeling. Not withdrawal from life, but deeper engagement with what truly matters. The still mind sees more clearly, responds more appropriately, acts more effectively than the mind caught up in the endless chatter of reaction and emotion. This clarity of vision is perhaps the greatest gift of self-mastery, and we are not clouded by our own emotional reactions. We can see situations as they truly are rather than as we fear them to be or wish them to be. We can respond to reality rather than to our projections, make decisions based on facts rather than feelings, act from wisdom rather than impulse. Such clarity is rare in a world where most people are prisoners of their own emotional reactions. The businessman who cannot see opportunities because he is blinded by fear of failure. The father who cannot connect with his children because he is defending against old wounds. The leader who cannot make difficult decisions because he is paralyzed by the need for approval. But the man who has learned to master himself sees with clear eyes. He recognizes opportunity where others see only risk. He finds connection where others encounter only conflict, makes decisions based on principle rather than pressure. This clarity of vision translates into effectiveness in every area of life. When you control yourself, you control your destiny. Not because you can dictate external circumstances. No one can do that completely, but because you can choose your response to whatever circumstances arise. Your response determines not only your experience, but often the outcome itself. Consider the business leader facing a crisis. The one who responds with panic creates more chaos, damages relationships, and often makes the situation worse. But the one who responds with calm clarity can often find solutions that were invisible to the reactive mind. His stillness becomes a source of stability for others. His clear thinking provides direction when confusion reigns. The same principle applies in personal relationships. The husband who meets conflict with defensiveness and anger escalates problems and damages trust. But the one who responds with patient understanding and firm kindness often transforms conflict into deeper connection. His self-control creates space for his partner's better nature to emerge. In parenting, a father who loses his temper teaches his children to fear rather than respect authority. But the one who combines firmness with fairness, who disciplines from love rather than anger, raises children who understand the difference between power and authority, between force and strength. These are not abstract philosophical concepts, but practical truths that play out in daily life. The man who has learned to control himself discovers that he has gained something far more valuable than the ability to control others. He has gained the ability to influence others through the power of example. Such influence is subtle but profound. It does not announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic speeches. Instead, it works through presence, through consistency, through the quiet authority that comes from alignment between values and actions. People may not be able to articulate what they sense in such a man, but they feel it, the sense that here is someone who knows himself, who will not be blown about by every wind of circumstance or emotion. This influence extends far beyond personal relationships. In business, the leader who has mastered himself often achieves better results than the one who relies on force or manipulation. His employees trust him because his decisions are based on principle rather than mood. His partners respect him because his word is reliable. His competitors find him difficult to defeat because he does not make emotional decisions that can be exploited. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the practice of examining our thoughts and impressions before accepting them as true. Most people live at the mercy of their first impressions, their immediate emotional reactions, their automatic assumptions. But the disciplined mind creates space between stimulus and response, between what happens and how we interpret what happens. In this space lies freedom. The freedom to choose our response rather than simply react. The freedom to act from our highest values rather than our lowest impulses. The freedom to be who we choose to be rather than who our emotions demand us to be in any given moment. This is not the cold freedom of disconnection, but the warm freedom of conscious choice. The Stoic is not unmoved by life's joys and sorrows. He simply refuses to be governed by them. He feels deeply, but acts wisely. He cares without being consumed by caring. He loves without being enslaved by love. Seneca wrote, "The mind that is anxious about future misfortunes is miserable." The same could be said of the mind that is enslaved to past grievances or present frustrations. True freedom comes from accepting what has happened, engaging fully with what is happening, and preparing wisely for what may happen while remaining unattached to any particular outcome. This detachment is often misunderstood as indifference, but it is quite the opposite. The man who is not emotionally invested in outcomes can often achieve better outcomes because his decisions are not clouded by desperation or need. The businessman who does not need a particular deal to succeed often negotiates more effectively. The father, who is not desperate for his children's approval, often earns their respect more easily. This principle applies to every area of life. The artist who creates for the love of creation often produces better work than the one driven by need for recognition. The athlete who competes for the joy of competition often performs better than the one paralyzed by fear of failure. The lover who gives freely often receives more love than the one who gives to get. The mastery of self extends beyond individual benefit. When we control ourselves, we stop being part of the problem and start being part of the solution. The man who has learned to manage his anger stops contributing to the cycle of conflict that damages relationships and communities. The one who has conquered his fear stops spreading anxiety to those around him. The one who has tamed his ego stops turning every interaction into a competition. Instead, such a man becomes a source of stability in an unstable world. His presence calms rather than agitates. His words heal rather than wound. His actions build rather than destroy. This is not because he has become perfect, but because he has learned to act from his better nature rather than his worse impulses. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." This simple instruction contains profound wisdom. Most suffering comes not from present circumstances, but from our thoughts about past failures or future fears. The present moment, this breath, this decision, this choice is where our power lies. When we truly inhabit the present moment, we discover resources we never knew we possessed. Creativity that was blocked by anxiety begins to flow. Solutions that were hidden by emotional turmoil become visible. Relationships that were strained by past resentments or future fears find new life in present attention. The present moment is also where self-mastery is practiced. You cannot change yesterday's angry outburst or guarantee tomorrow's patience. But we can choose right now to pause before speaking, to breathe before reacting, to respond from our highest self rather than our most triggered emotions. Each present moment is an opportunity to strengthen the muscle of self-control. Each time we choose response over reaction, principle over impulse, wisdom over emotion, we become a little stronger, a little more masterful, a little more free. This is why the Stoics place such emphasis on daily practice. Marcus Aurelius began each day with reflection on Stoic principles. Seneca ended each day by examining his thoughts and actions. Epictetus taught his students to view every challenge as an opportunity to practice virtue. They understood that self-mastery is not a destination, but a journey, not of achievement, but a practice, not a state to be reached, but a commitment to be renewed each day. The work never ends because new challenges constantly arise, but the work itself becomes its own reward. The man who commits to this path discovers something remarkable. The more he controls himself, the less he needs to control anything else. The businessman who masters his own reactions finds that others naturally follow his lead. The father who governs his own emotions finds that his children seek his guidance. The husband who manages his own responses finds that his marriage becomes a source of strength rather than stress. This is the ultimate paradox of power. We gain control over our external world by relinquishing the illusion that we can control our external world. We influence others by focusing on influencing ourselves. We create the outcomes we desire by becoming the kind of person who naturally creates such outcomes. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius had legions at his command, yet he knew that his greatest victory was not won on any battlefield, but in the quiet moments when he chose patience over anger, wisdom over impulse, service over self-interest. His empire eventually fell, as all empires do. But his example of self-mastery continues to inspire and instruct more than 18 centuries later. This is the only empire that cannot be conquered, the only kingdom that cannot be overthrown, the only power that cannot be taken away. External circumstances may strip us of wealth, position, relationships, even health, but they cannot touch the core of who we choose to be unless we allow them to. The Stoics taught that we are like actors in a play. We did not choose the role. We were given our circumstances, our challenges, our natural talents and limitations, but we can choose how to play that role. We can perform with dignity or complaint, with grace or resistance, with wisdom or foolishness. The man who has learned to master himself plays his role with excellence, regardless of whether he was cast as king or peasant. Regardless of whether the script calls for triumph or tragedy, he finds meaning not in the role itself but in the quality of his performance. He measures success not by external applause but by internal alignment with his highest values. Such a man cannot be defeated in any meaningful sense. He may fail at specific endeavors, face setbacks and losses, encounter criticism and opposition. But he cannot be broken because his sense of worth does not depend on external validation. He cannot be corrupted because his principles are not for sale. He cannot be manipulated because his happiness does not depend on others' approval. This is true freedom, not the ability to do whatever we want, but the strength to do what we know is right regardless of the cost. Not the absence of constraints, but the wisdom to focus our energy on what lies within our influence. Not the elimination of problems, but the capacity to meet whatever problems arise with courage, wisdom, and grace. When you master yourself, you discover that you need very little from the external world to be content. Your peace does not depend on others' behavior. Your confidence does not require constant achievement. Your joy is not held hostage by circumstances. You become like a deep well that provides refreshment regardless of the weather above. This does not make you isolated or indifferent. Rather, it frees you to engage more fully with life because you are not constantly defending against it. You can love more deeply because you are not afraid of loss. You can work more effectively because you are not paralyzed by fear of failure. You can lead more naturally because you are not driven by need for recognition. The journey toward self-mastery is not easy. It requires confronting uncomfortable truths about ourselves, admitting our weaknesses, and working daily to transform our automatic reactions into conscious choices. It means giving up the comfortable illusions that our problems are caused by external circumstances, that our happiness depends on others' actions, that we are victims of forces beyond our control. But for those who commit to this path, the rewards are beyond measure. It's not the shallow rewards of external success, though these often follow as natural consequences, but the deep satisfaction of alignment between values and actions. Quiet confidence that comes from self-knowledge. The unshakable peace that no external circumstance can disturb. Marcus Aurelius wrote these words to himself in the privacy of his journal. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. These words were not written for history, but for his own guidance, his own encouragement in the daily struggle to live according to his principles. Yet they have outlasted his empire, survived the collapse of civilizations, continue to offer guidance to anyone willing to undertake the most important journey of all, the journey inward, toward mastery of the one kingdom that truly belongs to us, ourselves. He who controls himself controls everything, not because he dominates others, but because he no longer needs to. Not because he manipulates circumstances, but because he responds to them with wisdom. Not because he eliminates challenges, but because he meets them with courage. In mastering himself, he discovers the only victory that truly matters. The only power that cannot be taken away. The only kingdom that will never fall. This is the way of the Stoic warrior, not fighting external enemies, but conquering the chaos within. Not seeking power over others, but claiming dominion over the one realm where true authority is possible. It's not trying to control the world, but mastering the self that must live in whatever world exists. In this mastery lies freedom. In this freedom lies peace. In this peace lies the strength that moves mountains, not through force, but through the quiet power of a man who has learned to be still in the storm, calm in chaos, and true to himself. Regardless of what the world demands, the empire within awaits your rule. The crown of self-mastery waits for you to claim it. The battle for your soul continues with each breath, each choice, each moment between what you feel and what you do. Win this war, and you win everything that matters. For he who controls himself controls everything.